Welcome to Unlocked, the home of common sense that speaks Britain's language, with me, Martin Daubney. Since the very beginning of Lockdown 1, Unlocked has been campaigning to unlock the schools. Way back in June, along with school campaign group Us For Them, we began pointing out that lockdowns were decimating our children's life chances and that the most disadvantaged pupils were being hammered the hardest. The stark reality is that Britain's poorest children have fallen furthest behind across every measurable benchmark: reading, writing, plus their physical and mental health. And this week we found out there has been a 400% boom in eating disorders. On Monday, we reached breakthrough when the Tories echoed Unlocked and also teamed up with Us For Them, announcing their hashtag Reopen Schools campaign that made the front page of The Sun. This afternoon, mercifully, Prime Minister Boris Johnson finally gave us some light at the end of the tunnel when he announced that the schools would begin reopening.
If we achieve our target of vaccinating everyone in the four most vulnerable groups with their first dose by the 15th of February, and every passing day sees more progress towards that goal, then those groups that have developed immunity from the virus about 3 weeks later, that is by the 8th of March, we hope it will therefore be safe to begin the reopening of schools from Monday the 8th of March.
According to an Unlocked poll that has now attracted over 22,000 votes, the Prime Minister is very much in line with public mood. Some 2/3 called for the schools to be unlocked right now. This was despite our poll being hijacked by union activists and militant teachers. On today's Unlocked, we will establish why unlocking the schools is absolutely the right thing to do and why this will not place teachers or pupils in harm's way. We will also analyse the role of the teaching unions and lay out what we believe are some ideas to make sure that we open the schools on time and keep them open. No more false starts or empty hope. No more can there be a retreat into further lockdowns. We cannot bow to the unions. We must put pupils and not politics first. Here to discuss why they support our campaign to unlock the schools, we're joined by Lee Anderson, the Conservative MP for Ashfield, BBC legend and school governor Sue Cook, and also broadcaster, author, lockdown legend, and a great fan of ours, and so are we of you, Neil Oliver. Welcome, guys, to the show. Lee Anderson, why should we unlock the schools?
I think we need to step back a little bit and for once in our lifetimes think what it's like to be a child during this pandemic. And that's very difficult as an adult in this day and age. Children in this decade are much different to the children back in the day, back in the 70s and 80s when I grew up. They've got different pressures, and we live in different times. We've got parents that both work. They're a slave to their job, and it's difficult for children to be taken out of school. Most of them are doing quite well, doing well in their lessons. They've got a good network of friends, and that's all been taken away from them. And then they've been shoved back home, given a laptop or a tablet or whatever to learn the lessons, and they are missing out, and they are missing out big time. It's not just the lessons that they miss out on, it's the social interaction with their teachers and with their friends, with their staff. And what we also have to realise is that a lot of these children that are now stuck at home, they are in households where their parents won't sit with them to show them how to use a tablet or an iPad or read a book with them. We're letting our children down at the moment, and we need to get them back in school as soon as possible. And we need to get the teachers vaccinated and the staff and everybody associated with school, so there's no excuses. And it's great news what Boris has announced today, and hopefully they will be back in March. And I'm part of this campaign group as well, Us For Them, and I will be championing this in Parliament every single day to make sure our kids get back to school and we don't leave them any more behind than they currently are, especially in a place like Ashfield where we are left behind.
Sue Cook, why should we unlock the schools?
I can hardly believe that I'm having to sit here and justify kids going to school. It's unbelievable. Of course, kids need to be back at school. They've been in their bedrooms for months now. And it's, as Lee said, it's not just a matter of academic learning. It's just as much, if not more, a matter of being alongside your mates. You know, think back, being with your mates, you'd almost defined yourself by your mates. That was what was really important. Kicking a ball around, maybe, or just whatever games you're playing. Even in the learning process, it's the teamwork. And I think the most important thing is for kids to be back alongside their mates. It's how you come alive as a child, is being with your mates. Stuck in your bedroom with parents who are distracted at best is not the way to go. And I just think we must open the schools as soon as possible.
I would echo that sentiment. Next, Neil Oliver, why should we unlock the schools?
In this context, I speak only as a parent. I'm not an educator. I'm not involved in that world other than as a parent. And I just know that I've seen my own three, aged 12, 15 and 17, diminish in certain respect, because they're not out in the world, they're not looking forward anymore. Their horizons have become so foreshortened. And the school that my kids attend is a broad demographic. It's a state secondary school. It's a good school. So it's a very ordinary, normal catchment of kids, and we're hearing feedback from all of the parents and all of the children about how much they're all struggling. And we were all painfully aware of all of the context for this, the danger of the virus and all the rest of it. But there are undoubtedly collateral damages that are being inflicted upon society, and the children, the generation coming up, are right at the forefront of it. And I mean, my own kids, they come out of their bedrooms at the moment, they're sitting in shuttered rooms so that they can see the screens properly. And they're in for hours at a time, and they come out with dark circles under their eyes, they're whey-faced, they're dispirited, they're discouraged, they're anxious, they're exhibiting all the signs of stress. And I mean, we are, my wife and I, we work from home, we're around them, we're watching them, we're as on them as any parents could try to be. And yet we're seeing how much they're struggling. And they, as Sue said, I mean, and Lee said, they just belong in school. And we're aware of all of the problems, as you say, if we can get the teachers and all the staff vaccinated and take all of whatever precautions are realistic, the kids need to go back, because they are the generation upon which the future of the country depends. And if they have their ambitions and their hopes and their confidence hobbled and flattened at this point, it will be very, very difficult to come back from that.
I echo everything that's been said so far. From a personal perspective, I'm a father of two. I have a boy who's 11 and a girl who is 6. My daughter has gone back to school. My missus, by the way, is a TA. She went back today for the first time as a teacher. More of that later. I'm very, very proud of her. We're actually getting our lives back. It feels amazing, and I wish that for every parent in Britain. It's also the parents who've been through the mill here. It's been so incredibly demanding. And one thing I saw from the very, very beginning was my boy and my girl go to a school of extremely mixed ethnicity, ability. There are poor kids come in, there are middle-class kids. It's a very, very typical London school. And I've seen a huge disparity in the kids who were already behind, have slipped even further behind. They were playing video games, they're playing football. Often their parents are away, they don't have tech. It's been a huge disadvantage foisted upon them. And not only that, now my girl is back and my boy isn't. My girl just can't wait to go to school in the morning. She's bouncing through the school gates. She's seeing her friends again. She's back where she belongs. And my boy is crying because the internet won't work. He can't get the tech to work. It's no way for a child to learn. And from a hands-on perspective, as well as what's good for the nation, I absolutely think we're doing the right thing to unlock the schools. I'd like to move on now to the second part of the show, because a huge resistance to this from the beginning was the feeling that reopening the schools was selfish in terms of we were deliberately placing teachers in harm's way at the risk of catching COVID. Except there's been some conflicting data out on that. I'd like to play a chart in now. This came out this week. This is from the ONS. This is official data showing the likelihood to die from coronavirus across occupations. At the bottom there, you can see the average per profession. It's about 240 cases per 100,000. Now, look at teachers circled in chalk there. They're actually below the national average. And when we look at the occupations who are actually the most endangered, we're in for quite a surprise. Because we saw a two-tiered lockdown, didn't we? The working classes, who were still ferrying stuff to the middle classes, who were happily furloughed at home. We can see quite clearly in this chart, top of the list, postmen, cleaners, security staff, and other performing elementary tasks. Elementary tasks, to me, sounds a bit insulting. These are the people that kept society going. Lee Anderson, let's talk about the clap for the carers. There was no clap for the bin men. There was no clap for the post workers. What does this say to you, Lee, about professions and the risk? And more pertinently to everybody, but to Lee Anderson first, what does it say about the actual risk to teachers?
We must try and live lives as normally as possible. And there are people out there on the front line, as you say, every single day. Postmen, bin men, environmental workers cleaning our parks up, cleaning our streets up, all these type of people. And they have to go to work. They have no other choice. But what's more important than teaching our children? I can't think of any job that's less. Heard that bit again, Martin?
Yes, mate.
Can you start from the beginning, please, Lee?
Yeah. Okay. So Martin, you
Hold on.
All right, mate.
Lee, if you could go in 5, 4, 3.
Yes, Martin, you're quite right. You know, throughout this pandemic, we've seen some real heroes in the community. And you've bin men, the environmental workers in your parks. You know, all these people, your transport, your delivery drivers, have to go to work every day to keep our country functioning. Now, one of the other major functions of this country is to educate and look after our children, and they should be in school. And I can't think of many jobs in this country that's more important than having our children at school learning. And what I forgot to mention last time, don't children have so much fun at school as well as learning and getting their qualifications? It's a fun place to be for a lot of children. So I would say the teachers in my area have been pretty good, actually. But I would say to the unions in particular that, yes, we're all at risk. Every single person on this call is at risk from getting COVID. I've had COVID, my wife's had COVID, and we're all at risk of catching this awful disease and ending up in hospital. But, you know, there's a risk worth paying to make sure that our children get educated, they don't get left behind, and they make they get the very best life choices when they leave school. And keeping them off school for a long time is going to damage their mental health, their physical health, and scupper their chances when they leave school.
So when we look down these figures, Sue, you can see teachers are below the national average at risk of catching or dying of COVID. In fact, actually, so are doctors and nurses. So surely if we look at the data, Sue, there is no clear case for keeping the schools closed any longer.
Well, it seems to me that the teachers are worried about their safety no matter what the data says. And when you weigh things up, it's so much more important to give the children a proper education and a proper rounded life in school than worrying about the teacher's safety. I do understand. I don't want to be unsympathetic, but I think teachers have to really be unselfish here and a bit brave and come forward and, you know, do the job. It's a vocation after all. Please be a bit braver, teachers.
But lots of teachers out there want to get back to work, but they're scared to say so in case somehow it seems like they're betraying the cause. Neil Oliver, when we look down these figures here, who would have thought that sales workers and builders and other manual professions are more at risk of COVID than NHS workers or teachers?
I'm begun to just think about it all in simpler terms. I think Sue's use of the word vocational, I think, was very important. That's such a rich and deep meaning that comes from that word. And teaching, like people that work in nurses and doctors, so vocation, that sense of a calling that matters to people above and beyond. That's why those teaching and caring for the sick was traditionally, it came out of the monasteries and the religious communities to begin with, because it was all part of that feeling that a person might want to sacrifice themselves actually in the service of the community. Now, my kids' teachers, we see them 2 or 3 times a year at parents' night and whatever, and like teachers across the country, they're excellent. giving of themselves, giving of their time above and beyond, and very much wanted to just get on with it. And they made it plain that they were aware of the risks, and they were prepared to take that into account. And of course, where, as in any profession, where people genuinely feel that the threat, that the risk that they see around them is too much, then no one wants to put anyone's arm up their back and force them to get into the workplace. If people want to self-isolate and keep out of it, then of course they ought to be entitled to do that. But my experience as a parent, and as a parent who mixes with my children's teachers, I know that we were getting the feedback that they wanted to get on with it, to get back to the business of teaching kids in busy, interested, enthused classrooms.
As Lee said, most of the schools in Britain have been open since the very beginning, teaching key workers, critical workers, children. Where my wife works has been open right from the beginning all the way through. Obviously greatly limited pupil numbers. But I want to talk about something which I think is really key. My mum was a teacher for 35 years in Nottinghamshire. She lives in Eastwood. That's how I know Lee when we fought on the campaign trail. Teaching some of the most disadvantaged boys, mainly boys across Nottinghamshire. Her job was to keep them out of jail. Now, these were boys on their kind of last strike in the education system. My mother's reaction to the pandemic has been really interesting, and in particular to teachers. I want to put this to the panel now. And she says this: these teachers that don't want to go in and teach kids, the teachers who treat this as an inconvenience, the teachers who put their own risk before their public service, they're in the wrong profession.
Yes, I totally agree, Martin. Not only are they in the wrong profession, I think probably they're in the wrong country, because we are a country that is a brave country, and we've always stepped up through history. And we're asking people to step up now and do their bit for Queen and country, and stepping up, keeping our kids in school, keeping them educated, giving the very best opportunities they can have. That's key in this issue, because, in 10 years' time, some of these teachers have got to have a long, hard look at themselves and think, did I do my bit? And let me just add, it is a minority that's being controlled by the unions, but they really need to look long and hard at themselves and think, did I play my part during that year? And most of them will have, but there's a tiny minority, like I say, on the strings, on the apron strings of the unions, that have got a lot to answer for.
Something else I want to talk about, Sue Cook. Are we teaching children to be terrified of the world, to be vulnerable, and are we highlighting their fragility at a time when we should be teaching them to be strong and robust?
Well, that certainly is a worry, isn't it? I'm a governor of a very little state school in a village, I like, as you were saying, my school's been open for a while for key workers, so it's kept going. And I know that all the teachers are just wonderful, and they all want to keep teaching. They just love their job. But obviously they've got to walk the path between the union problems but I think they're trying very hard to keep in touch with all the children and the parents and make sure that the kids are feeling as, trying to boost their confidence as much as they can, because there's nothing more boring apart from anything else than being incredibly safe, is there? Kids need risk. They love running around and grazing their knees and falling off trees and certainly I did, falling off their bikes. So I really would hope that maybe childhood will overcome all and they'll be able to go back and be running around like crazy again after March the 8th, fingers crossed, when they can get back, because I don't think we should squash that at all.
Let's make no mistake about this. Since the very beginning, reopening schools, closing schools, reopening them has been a political football. We've seen this across London with a selective reopening of schools that the Labour Party very quickly jumped upon and made political. Labour wanted lockdowns earlier, harder and longer. And recently we've seen data I'd like to look at now, quite frankly, dodgy data. Bear in mind, at the top of this show, we actually analysed the risk of dying of COVID to the teaching profession is lower than the national average. Yet we had 2 studies come out recently from 2 big school unions which completely contradicted that. And I'd like to look at them now and ask the questions, why is this dodgy data being put out? You can see them there now. The first one was at the beginning of January, the beginning of this month, And this is from the NASUWT union, which claimed teachers were 333% above average. Bear in mind, we established at the top of the show, teachers are actually below average. This study showed they are more than 3 times as likely to catch COVID. The second study was from the National Union, the NEU, beg your pardon, and that showed that teachers were twice as likely to catch COVID. Now, let's just press the pause button and think for a minute. Why would that data come out? First of all, let's look at the methodology. When you look into this, the studies, and they've been widely disavowed and they've been taken down. They are by looking at figures of absenteeism, cross-referencing them with actual contagion, and extrapolating across 2 weeks instead of 1 week. The net result, and we'll put these links on the show so you can see them for yourself at the bottom so you can analyse it for yourself. The net result has been teachers believe this. My wife is a TA, as I said. She actually believes, because she gets the union newsletters and the emails, that teachers are more at risk. It's terrifying teachers into not going back to work. Lee Anderson, you're a guy with a history. You were a member of the Labour Party. You campaigned for the Labour Party. You were a Labour councillor in Ashfield before you became the Tory MP for Ashfield. Why would school unions put out such misinformation, Lee?
I think that's pretty obvious, Martin. We have the unions, the Labour Party and the media all working together to attack pretty much everything, I think, that this government has tried to do. And one of those things they are leaping on the back of is education. Now, I visit a lot of schools, not so many recently, but I do Zoom calls and I've done a few playground visits as well. And I can tell you from me that some of the teachers are actually scared of the unions. Some of the letters they've had, the briefings they've had from the unions makes them feel uneasy. It makes them feel as if they should not be at work, that they should be at home. And that sort of fits the narrative, because you've got to remember that these unions, if you go back to the day of the 70s, when I was growing up, I always like to harp on about the 70s, the unions were quite powerful in this country. My old industry, the coal mines, the steels, the transport, the railways, whatever, could pretty much hold our country to ransom. They could, in fact, they did in 72 and 74. They can change governments. That's how powerful the unions were. Now, unions are a little bit more sensible these days, but the last bastion, if you like, they can actually not scrutinise government, but can try and derail government, is the teaching unions. And I think actually, during this pandemic, some of the things I've seen has made me feel quite ashamed of some of these people that are in high positions, and they seem to just want to score political points. They've got their own agenda, and it's nothing to do with the welfare of the children at all. It's nothing to do with opening our schools up. It's nothing to do with doing the right thing. It's all about undermining this government. And quite frankly, they should be ashamed of themselves.
Yeah, I mean, are you expecting, Lee Anderson, after Boris Johnson's announcement today, the 8th of March, is the goal for reopening the schools, are you expecting the unions could kick back even against that?
I go by my inbox every day, and I can tell you now that 70 to 80% of parents that email me want their children back at school. And I think most teachers want their kids back at school. It's just the unions. It's the unions, the Labour Party and the media that's going to kick a fuss up. But at the end of the day, common sense will prevail. We've got to put our children first. They need to be in school. We need to think about our children's future, not the future of a trade union or a political party. We need to put all that on the back burner, stop being so selfish, and get our kids back in school and do what we should be doing, and that's giving them the best chances possible.
Can I cut back to you, Sue, because this campaign announced today, first of all, is £1 million to keep children at home. It's to assist with their home learning. Surely, Sue Cook, that is contra to everything we know is best for children.
I don't care if it's £1 million, £2 million, £10 million. Children need to be back at school. And I think that's just a complete sop. And I'm shocked to hear Lee, but I'm sure he's right, that this is all about undermining this government. But how despicable is that? I'd be one to defend unions. I've always been one to defend unions because we need to make sure that people are given a fair deal in the workplace. But it's a balance thing again. It's the balance has gone too far, like it did in the 70s. And I remember the 70s. My father was an arbitrator and conciliator on ACAS, and he was very involved in all those union problems in the 70s. And so I've always been taken interest in union business. But this is going far too far. And if it's about undermining the government at the expense of the well-being of children, it's despicable.
Neil Oliver, do you think that's the case? Do you think the unions are just playing politics when really this should be about pupils?
I don't consider myself to be any kind of an expert on union matters. I don't. But I know that I want to be in a community and in a society where adults put children first. Right across the board, and of course, education of the generation coming up, of the children, is absolutely paramount. I've always been mystified by the way in which I think teaching. I genuinely think teaching should be one of the highest paid, most respected professions imaginable. I honestly can't think really, if you think in human terms, about what more of a contribution can a person give out with their own family to society than inspiring and bringing on the hopes and aspirations of the generation coming up. And I've got every sympathy with the idea that profession should be held in the highest possible regard. And I don't know how that fits in with union ideology, but I couldn't personally hold teachers in any higher regard than I do. I think it's it should be a truly vocational profession. But I fear more broadly across the picture, I feel everything is becoming so atomized. Everything is becoming about calculating risk, weighing up everything, not being prepared to do anything unless it's 100% safe, and that every eventuality has been calculated and allowed for. But I don't believe that we ever have, nor that we ever will live in a society like that. And we've got to just face up across the broader picture, as I say, to the fact that we've now got a new virus, or perhaps a new set of viruses among us. And yes, that poses risks, and there will be dying and there will be death on account of it. But in the midst of it and in responding to it, we have to inspire people, raise morale, boost the fighting spirit, and that surely has its foundations, its bedrock is in the children. That the children coming up have to see the adults behaving in such a way that they think, yes, there are risks out there and there are threats to life and limb and well-being, but we still go on and we do things because they are worth doing. So rather than just calculating risk all the time, as we're looking at actuary tables before we get out of bed in the morning, a functioning society has to be populated by people who are prepared to take the chance, take the risks, push ahead, face up to the fact that it's an imperfect world and that things will go wrong and mistakes will be made, but you've got to be out there taking the chance. And those whose vocation is apparently to bring on the next generation, then if they truly believe, if they truly are what they say they are, then they have to be in the forefront of those people who are out there taking those risks and doing whatever they can to lead. They are leaders of the community and leaders of society.
One of the things that's truly struck us since the beginning of our campaign to unlock the schools way back in June was the sheer number of human stories that we've heard. We've been contacted by parents, oftentimes at their wits' end. They're seeing their children kind of disappear before their eyes. We've also heard stories from teachers who desperately want to go back to teach, frozen in the headlights of unionists who are making them feel ashamed and making them feel like they're traitors just for wanting to do their job and to serve the children in their charge. We reached out to Unlocked viewers to get some stories, and this incredible story came in now that I'd like to share, and I'd like to compel people on the call, Sue, Lee and Neil, to try and share some human stories that you've heard about the effect this is having, because this isn't just data, this is humanity and it's real. This story came to us, and it's on behalf of a friend who was too emotional to write themselves. Grace, not her real name, is a single mum of 4. She's a cleaner and receives no help. Her children are aged 5, 8, 13 and 15. Grace can't teach them all. She finds it so hard to manage that she gave up. She only has a basic education herself and struggles to comprehend the lessons or manage their time. Her children haven't had a proper education for the best part of a year. They do nothing all day except play video games and argue. Grace has also lost control of her teenage son. The school helped her cope with him, but now she feels they've lost more than just their education. It's their most vital social interaction, access to real sport, and for her, a lifeline to cope with her son. Even when he returns, her eldest son won't bother to study for his exams. He has simply lost interest. And now her youngest is clearly falling behind. A laptop won't help. It's been devastating. When you hear things like that, Lee Anderson, this isn't just about data. This isn't about politics. It's about the future of our children. And surely that's worth fighting for.
It's heartbreaking, Martin, to hear that story. And that's not a story in isolation. Trust me, my inbox has got many stories like that in. And I think the first thing we need to do as a nation is, say sorry to our children, say sorry to them for missing a year almost of their education. But we need to make a promise to them that moving forward, especially our teaching unions as well, we'll hop on to them. We need to make a promise to them as a nation that we're going to do our best to make sure that moving forward, their education is our priority. And we need to remind ourselves that our children today are going to be our managers, our policemen, our lawyers, our doctors, our politicians, our prime minister tomorrow. And we should never forget that. And I would never forgive myself if I didn't shout from the rooftops for our children and make sure that they get those life chances, make sure they get back in school as soon as possible, and make sure they get that education that they need. Let me tell you this, when I speak to children at 11-year-old on my Zoom meetings, they know the rules. They know about safe distancing. They know about the risks. They know about their hands, face, space. They know they've got to do all these things. So there's no excuse for teaching unions, for us adults, and for us politicians not to get them back in school as soon as possible.
Hear to that. Sue Kirk, as a school governor and as a parent, what kind of things have you heard that have really moved you about children's stories throughout the pandemic?
Oh, sorry, my cat is now walking trying to take over. Where was I? So, I mean, there's nothing more flattening than just sitting morosely looking at a screen. It's tough for only children, I suppose. In some ways, if there are 2 or 3 children, you've got each other. But then you're all at different stages of education. The parents sometimes got a key stage 1 here and a key stage 2 here, and an 11-year-old there, and it's really, really virtually impossible with the best will in the world. And there isn't always the best will in the world. And I just hope that if there will be more viruses, I have a feeling. I just hope we can promise our children that we will never, ever close the schools again if there's another virus. There must be a different way.
And Neil Oliver, before we move on to some proactive solutions of what we believe we should be doing to help the schools reopen and stay open, what's the most moving story you've heard from either people you know or across the media about the impact on children of this lockdown?
Well, like everyone else, like all of us, I've heard, stories about people, contemplating, suicide. There's been, I've now had numerous stories, not in my immediate hinterland, but people that are known to people that my children know. So we're hearing about that, which is certainly the worst. I mean, the mere fact that children are contemplating ending their lives on account of the circumstances that they find themselves in. I mean, that's really the lowest ebb, as far as I'm concerned. More broadly speaking, it's about the loss of aspiration. I'm very mindful of the fact that because I've had as much of my life as I have, I'm a 53-year-old, and I've done all this. I've had my education. I've been to university. I've had numerous jobs. I've travelled to 20 or 30 countries. I've had I've done all of these things, and faced with these 10 months of lockdown, I am finding this harrowing to go through, and I speak as someone who has that deep reservoir of life experiences to draw upon and to remind myself of. So I'm very mindful of the fact that 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds coming up, they haven't done all of that. All they've ever had was looking forward and hoping that they would have the chance to travel and to get education, or to have great jobs, or to have all of these experiences. And I'm very much aware of a way in which their horizons are being pulled in. And rather than looking out at the wider world, they've all got that kind of goldfish bowl mentality. My kids just talk about being, looking forward to no more than going out for a walk around the park. And that breaks my heart. The fact that they're being stoical about it, I don't want my 15-year-old being stoic. I want my 15-year-old to be furious about the fact that his world has become so small, and that he has internalized the idea that into a future that he's not able to predict. He thinks his future might remain small. And I really don't know what kind of a toll that is taking upon him. And I think I've said it before. I've said it in many contexts, that because the decisions are being taken and the restrictions are being put in place by people who tend to be the least affected by those restrictions that are being put in place. And it's beyond my belief that those people don't seem to be able to empathise with that reality. And I've quoted the Solzhenitsyn line about, if you're feeling cold, don't expect sympathy from somebody who's warm. And I think that is actually a very revealing statement. Yeah. And I want a return to compassion. I'm so aware of a lessening of compassion out there in wider society. And I've been dismayed by how so many people seem to be prepared to look on at the suffering of others and say, well, we just have to suck this up and get through it. And if those people have to suffer, then so be it. Yeah. Good. I can't. I look out at it and I despair, because, to me, any life loss, be it through COVID or be it through suicide from loss of hope, or be it through diminished health, prospects because they haven't been treated by the NHS for all of the obvious reasons. I can't countenance the fact that our society is accepting a sort of a triage, that there are people out there who can't be saved. I just can't do it.
Yeah, superb. One thing that was amazing for me was how much normal things have become extraordinary. And what I mean by that, it snowed on Sunday. And having been locked in the house for months, the doorbell went. It was my son's school friends, 2 11-year-old boys, red-faced, covered in snow, knocked on the door. And my son said, "Am I allowed to go out, Dad?" And I was almost weeping. It's like, "Yes, of course you are, son. Get out." And he was like not sure that he was allowed to even go out and play in the snow, because we've been told for so long, this might kill a granny, or this might do some tangible harm. And don't we just want those normal things back? Kids just going out to play, kids having a life. Now then, let's move on to some solutions. Boris Johnson has said today, the 8th of March is that goal, to unlock the schools. Let's look at what that return to normality might look like. And I'm going to turn first to Lee Anderson. So Lee, we've got a bunch of ideas of our own, but you're the man at the beating heart of government. What kind of tangible steps do we need in place to ensure a safe return?
I wouldn't say I'm the beating heart of government, Martin. I'm just a backbench MP with my own ideas and my own thoughts on the matter. I think, first of all, we need to give the unions no excuse for a return back to school. And I would start with the vaccination process. I work at a vaccination centre as a volunteer 4 days a week. And I can see how fast we're processing these people. And we're absolutely flying through the figures. And I would say mid-February, when we've got the priority groups almost done, or they've been offered a vaccination, we should start looking at sectors of our society which we need to get back to normal as soon as possible. And there's no sector more important than the education of our children. So I would say, let's get our teachers, our TAs, our dinner ladies, everybody that's associated with our schools in the United Kingdom, let's get them vaccinated. So come March, the first week in March, they're ready to go. And then we need to prepare children to get back to school. And that can only be done through the educational system. You know, it's going to be a big wrench for a lot of children. They've gone from being at school with their friends, having a great time, to being all of a sudden put back in the house, where many of them, as we've heard from the stories, have had a torrid time with their mental health. So that's going to be another big wrench. You're going to take them from one situation back into a school situation as well. So that's going to be difficult for some children. But what we've got to do is make sure the children feel loved. We've got to apologise to our children for keeping them locked up for nearly a year. And we've got to show them that there's a way out of here. And Neil's quite right about risks and all these things that go on in everyday life. Children have got to learn these things.
I think to move things forward, we should all probably agree it'll be a sensible idea to prioritise teachers for the vaccination. And by my maths, there's about 506,000 teachers in the UK. Well, you're rattling through 300,000 a day at the moment, Lee. We'll have them done by the weekend, surely. There could be no excuse just to get the teachers vaccinated. We can go on site. We can visit schools and do it actually in the place of work, can't we?
Well, we could, you know, with the amount of vaccinations we're currently doing, you could do every single teacher in this school in a weekend. It's as simple as that. One weekend, you know, over 300,000 you can do in one day. That beats your number quite easily. Let's have them back at school. Let's say to the unions, you know what, you've come up with all these problems for the past year, all these problems. Where are your solutions to make our children and our teachers safe in school? Because as far as I can see, they've not provided any.
And I know from personal experience, my missus, as I said, is a TA. She went back to school today for the first time. Well, she was back between September and December, but she's back now. And she was given a COVID testing pack. She tested herself this morning. She got in the shower. When she got out, half an hour later, she was COVID negative. She's through the school gates. So Lee and the rest of the people, Neil and Sue, we should surely, Sue Cook, we should be testing teachers regularly. And this is easy. It's cheap. It takes half an hour. Testing for every teacher every week. Sue Cook.
I think as far as the kids are concerned, we need to get them back on track. I don't know how difficult it's going to be for everybody. It will be difficult more for some than others, but I think we need to hit the ground running. Lots of school trips. We'll have spring and summer to look forward to. Lots of outdoor activities, lots of social things. And as Neil said, I think the worry is we've lost a lot of compassion and we've lost empathy. This whole thing has been so divisive. We had the Brexit thing for 3 years, 4 years, which I think divided us more than I've ever seen our country divided. And that divisiveness seemed to continue on now to the way we've handled this virus and whether we lock down or whether we don't, how we handle things. And people seem to have taken sides and there's a lot of anger out there. You look on social media and, well, it's best not to because a lot of the time. So I hope we can somehow find a way to lose these divisions that we've built up really over the last 5 years and get back to some empathy and love. And the kids can not see people who are divided and angry with each other, but I think it's almost more important that the kids see that people can get on with each other and we're all happy and, you know, getting on with each other.
But Lee Anderson, you wanted to have a quick word there about testing.
I completely get the argument that weekly testing or twice weekly testing. I suspect, though, Martin, and I know I bang on about the unions, they're going to object to this. They're going to either want extra training, extra money, or something that's going to put a bit of a block on teachers doing testing on themselves in school. So watch out for that one. I'll make a prediction that there will be some kickback from unions on that one.
So my missus gets given a pack of tests when she gets into school. She goes home, she does it herself. she goes back knowing with some degree of certainty that she's okay and safe to teach that day. Why the hell would anybody want to stop that process happening?
Well, a good question. Why would they? Unless they want to undermine the process of getting children back in school. But I'm hearing whispers on the grapevine, on the educational grapevine, that some of the unions are not happy with the fact that teachers may have to test themselves when they go back to school. So we'll see how that pans out, Martin.
I want to probe you a bit more on that, Lee. What do you mean by that? Why would a union not want an individual to test themselves to be safe?
Why wouldn't they, Martin? I don't know. The only reason I
think you're being coy. I think you do know.
I'm being very coy, Martin. The only reason I can think of is they want to undermine government, they want to undermine the process, and they want to undermine the whole situation that we're currently in. We've seen the Shadow Education Secretary, if I'm honest, try and undermine it. That, it's too good of a crisis not to exploit. Anything they can do to try and get back at government or get back at Boris, or get back at the Conservative Party, or anything to do with getting our children back at school. There is a tiny element in the trade union movement that will try and undermine that, and I make no bones about it. It's despicable. In my minds, they're just as bad as fifth columnists were 75 years ago. If I'm not being coy now, am I, Martin? I'm actually telling you how I feel. So mark my words, there will be some kickback on this. Wow, that's just staggering to hear. I hope it doesn't happen, but hey, Lee, hope, we're always surprised in this game. Neil Oliver, I want to cut to you. There's one final point I think we need to make clear, and that is the risk to children who are vulnerable and have underlying medical conditions. It's worth pointing out, by the way, that since the beginning of the pandemic, only 7 under 18s in the UK have died of COVID-19, and all of them had profound underlying health conditions. Also, I think it's 11 teachers who've tragically died of COVID. There have been health conditions there too. So, Neil, it would seem sensible, would it not? Not just to send every child and every teacher back to school, but also to look at who's vulnerable and to make sure we take care of them.
If you're asking me, I think it became apparent. I think it became apparent early on, relatively early on, that we knew who were most at risk, and that that all of the efforts should have been in shielding and protecting those whose risk we understood by March and April last year. I would always people who believe themselves to be, which is crucial because people are capable of evaluating their own risk. People who believe themselves to be at risk, then they should take whatever precautions they need to take, to remain safe if that's how they feel. But I would not be happy, if you're asking me, with anything less than a commitment from on high that we do not embark upon national lockdown again on the model that we have seen it so far. The ruinous consequences for the economy, which, heavens above, I dread to think what the collateral damage will prove to have been. And all of the other collateral damage to everybody else, everyone's health and well-being. I wouldn't be satisfied with anything less than a commitment to not have national lockdowns in the way that we have had them so far. Because, not dying is not the same as living. And if the future really is in a future of more viruses, more contagion, in the future, if the only solution to that is to stay in our homes, away from loved ones and away from one another, then I don't call that life. And if you ask me, I want a commitment that we don't do this again.
Lee Anderson, I just want to probe you one more time this before we wrap up. If the unions do block testing, if they start making this and threatening even industrial action, mate, this is going to be carnage.
It will, Martin. I suspect that moving forward, the unions will maybe try and push for this, but I suspect the public backlash will be so great that the actual union members, the teachers, the TAs, the staff will push back at the unions. I think this actually is a bridge too far.
We need to unlock the schools and get our kids back where they belong, not in front of their video games, but back in the classroom. Thanks to everybody for coming on the show today.
My
We're a
pleasure.
new channel. We're building. We're the new kids on the block. Please support us. Please share on Facebook, on social media, on Twitter. Keep following us. Keep the pressure. And we're going to keep going to make sure we unlock the schools. And this time, keep them unlocked. Thank you for watching Unlocked.